Hello, listeners. Welcome to Freelance Friday with Casey, a podcast all about freelancing through the opinions and experience of a current full-time freelancer. And today's episode is one from a series of interviews with members from Weld. Weld is a collaborative workspace. They have a location in Nashville, and there used to be a location in Dallas where I was a member at for 4 years, and really helped me get my freelance business going and kind of get into that world. During my time there, I learned a lot, and I made a lot of great relationships with some incredible creatives in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so I decided to reach out to a few of them to see if they would be interested in doing interviews, and graciously and gratefully they accepted. And so these few episodes are going to be those interviews with them. And so today's interview is with Daniel Nanasi from Think Branded Media. Daniel and his business partner, Beau Etheridge, run a little video production agency. And Daniel has been an encouragement to me over the last several years. And he's always been somebody that I feel like that I can talk to and that gives me great feedback and encourages me and has been there to help lift me up in the times when I felt like I was down. And Daniel, thanks so much for coming on the show. I love you, man. I really appreciate you doing this. It's such a fun conversation. Well, Daniel, thanks for coming on the show today here on Freelance Friday on a Monday.
It is Monday.
It is. We have yet another former Weld member here. Had quite a few on so far.
Welders?
Yeps. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Daniel is a co-founder of Think Branded Media. They are a video production company based here in Dallas. They do some really great work. They're really fun to work with, really nice people. But I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself and what y'all do to start us out.
Thank you. Think Branded Media, we produce branded content, branded media for anyone and everyone who needs it. Healthcare is a lot of our bread and butter. We do a lot of nonprofit type work, but then for brands and agencies, large and small, storytelling, kind of micro documentary style, all unscripted. We're big fans of documentaries. And what else am I supposed to talk about?
Whatever you want people to know about you.
Yeah, well, I guess the history of that is prior to Think Branded, Beau and I, who's my business partner, who you know as well, we were partners with 4 other people in another production company that was like totally vertically integrated from scripts to distribution. And we had a huge studio, like over 30,000 square feet, 20,000 of it like stages.
Wow, that's a lot.
Like 40-foot wide green screen and standing sets that Beau built. Beau's actually a production designer. You should talk to him about that and his background as art directing, production designing.
You should help me with that. I've asked him a couple of times trying to get him to come on, so maybe
yeah, I will
help facilitate that.
Yeah, and he knows. I just talked to him, so he knows I'm here right now. So, but yeah, and so that company, we did everything for everyone. We did like commercials and music videos and like reality TV development and like some feature films, and we rented out the space and like operated this huge space, and it was really good, training, and I got a lot of experience with a lot of different types of projects and equipment and people and budgets, and some of it was big and on a huge scale. And from that experience, what Beau and I liked the most, and Beau and I had been partners in doing media and stuff like that prior to even that company. So for a long time, like 13 years ago, Beau and I have been working together on media, on videos mainly. And we were also roommates, very good friends, he was the best man at my wedding. So really tight. We're so different though. We're so different, but from a creative appreciation, stylistic appreciation, we're kind of very similar.
2 peas in a pod, just kind of right
Yes.
there in that like find a
Yeah.
sweet spot.
and which is cool to have that where you're you know, but you still have differences that can contribute to what we do, what we're trying to do, what we have to do on a day to day basis and whatnot. But Bo and I, from all those projects in that older company, the ones we liked the best were these like was branded content, and we got to do some like projects with some experiential marketing companies and stuff like that, and like those were like our favorite type of projects. So they involve travel sometimes, and we just got to tell stories about something cool for like X brand. Doesn't matter because whatever the brand or the product even was not what we were really capturing. It's like we were capturing like lifestyle type stuff and like people and like stories, which is cool, and we did it with some cool brands, and but yeah, made some great content out of that. That like even today we still get hired. People hire us based on like that content, and that content, some of that content's like 10 years old. And so it goes to show that like, man, we could you know, people are always trying to update, their reel and their portfolio and their content and stuff, but it's like, yo, like it something that's like old to you, some the people that you're really trying to get to see this stuff, they don't know it's
It's
old.
brand. If they've never seen it before, and you don't have a date on it, like to them,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
And
It's just good quality work.
yeah, and if it's good, it's good, right? And so like that's what we found. And so that's really what we do, sorry, it's I talk a lot, but always bring it back to the question. But like what we really focus on is like branded content, via storytelling and documentary style. Because that's what we like. We have a lot of experience with it. We're good at it. I think we have a long way to go as well to always evolving what we're doing, how we're doing it. But yeah, we really like that. And yeah, that's the
So,
longest version of what we do
so
on the
for
show.
somebody that, so like first off, I want to hear a little bit more about the story. But before we go back to that, just for people that don't know, what is branded media?
Branded media is basically, I guess to be honest, it's the new way of saying commercials. You know, I mean, it is. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Uh, uh, just like when they say people or influencers, that's really just paid sponsorship. It's just branded differently, right? So it's really commercials, right? And the way a lot of commercials and advertising is going for all kinds of brands, large and small, is through, kind of like making an advertisement, not an advertisement.
So more like you mentioned, like lifestyle stories. So
Yeah, because the I guess the landscape we're in now, it's like so cool. If you're a content creator, in my opinion, because you could be a lot more successful with your work because you're actually creating work. We have the ability to create work with context, to what it is, and not only to the message but to the audience. And if you can create good contextual, that's almost in some respects guaranteeing you that people are gonna like ingest this. They're gonna consume this content that you're creating, and that's the best feeling ever if you're creating content, right?
yeah, that's what you
Is like,
want.
yeah, someone's gonna watch it. They're gonna get something out of it. It's gonna like help them somehow. It's gonna serve its purpose. That's its purpose.
Because I mean, at the end of the day, especially with even like commercial and advertising stuff, while you're like trying to sell a product, at the same time, like you're trying to like meet people where they're at to provide something of value to them.
Yeah.
And so telling stories in that way is like a way to help bring that
Yeah.
together.
And with like how everything's so niche now because you have these like channels, and like we have data and we have the internet and we have like all these channels and everyone can have their channel, and it's becoming so niche. Like people who make a ton of money by just because like a million people watch them play video games and stuff. I mean, that's like a niche. I'm not into that, but that's just proof in the pudding that like there are audiences out there, and there's never been a better way to reach those audiences, right? And also what that means is those audiences are not like as gullible or as like easily entertained as they were like 5, 10, 15 plus years ago. It's like you have to like really have good stuff, and they're gonna know the difference between like something gimmicky or like something unoriginal, no matter what it is, no matter what the brand or company or what it is. So it's an important time. It's an exciting time for people like us, I think.
I think so too. All right, so you guys had your studio space. I know that at some point you guys transitioned out of that. It's probably been like 3 or 4 years at this point, right?
Yeah, 4+ years. And so basically, it's a long, epic story, maybe for another time. But we had this, it's almost like we had a Ferrari, but couldn't put gas in it uh, because you had huge overhead. And basically, as soon as we got everything built and set up, and even the first film that we were producing, funded, casted, the guy who started the whole company and funded everything to that point unexpectedly passed away of a heart attack. And at that point there was no more funding because the company was so new and everything. So we were on our own to not only finish that film, which was raising like hundreds of thousands of dollars within first a week, and then the rest of it within a month, and some real crazy, I mean, like, and I was Bo and I were like new it, like I was like 23 or 24 at the time, and I was like in way over my head, trying to keep up. And then it was like literally like sink or swim, like literally like you and I knew like this was I don't know how to handle this situation, but if I I can try. I'm here. I'm on the bull. Just hold on and fuck it, what you have a lot to lose, but also nothing to lose, and to some degree, and just do what you got to do. And luckily, you have a good team with you, from Bo to all my other partners and stuff like that. It was the team, that kept it together. And that's, I think, for freelancers is tough because freelancers are like usually one person armies and isolated and like not, and that's why like things like Weld and people and communities like that are so important to keep cultivated, because like even if you're working on your own, like concepts of like your social network and your team, your collaborators, super important. I know I haven't finished the answer to that.
It's okay, we're
question,
getting there.
but yeah,
We're moving along.
yeah,
It's a good story. I like it.
yeah,
yeah. And the things you're saying are very valuable, very true.
Yeah, and
it is one of the. I mean, honestly, like that's while we're on this tangent. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I miss having, like, being so involved in a creative community, like we had when we were at Weld, because just to have those people that you see day in and day out that are like going through so many of the same things that you're going through, that you can kind of like bounce ideas off of, or even just to have people that you can talk with and know when they go, oh yeah, I know what you mean, that they can actually understand what you're meaning and truly relate to you, versus somebody else that doesn't have that lifestyle or know that life at all, trying to like connect with you, but not being able to because they just don't have the experience.
Yeah, and like we're Bo and I have been doing this for I guess enough time to where we have like, some, at least a foundation built, for what we're doing, and a lot of experience. And a lot of times people will call us, like usually younger people or people trying to get into, video production, content creation, whatever. And it's a lot of the same questions and like kind of obstacles that are out there, I mean, it's the same course, right? So why wouldn't it's like, so uh to your point, I think, when you have people, whether they're more seasoned than you or less seasoned than you, or like right there in the trenches or wherever you're at with you, to be able to share the experiences and stories, like it can help you work through a lot of things quicker, and even mitigate some like potential like delays on obstacles in the future that you may have with like a client or like a collab, anything. So it's just that it's just the best, most raw way of information exchange, crucial.
Yep.
And it's something that like doesn't come, that's not in your first, when you're starting off, like, as a freelance creative, you're not, the first thing on your list of like things to do to get to, to make your career are probably not like, asking yourself or scheduling for yourself, how am I, what am I doing to cultivate like relationships and connections, not just to get gigs and stuff, but like just to get ideas and just perspective, like what am I doing to do that? And like, yeah, spend an hour a day, and even if it's like watch this podcast, like that's to a degree, but I think there is a huge value to like, come in here, talking face to face, and like,
because you had that while like especially with the digital world now, you can be connected with so many different people in so many ways. There's still something about having that like in-person relationship where
Yeah.
you get to like see the person, especially with something like creative communities or co-working spaces, being able to see them day in and day out, where you kind of start to develop a little bit more than just surface level friendships,
Yeah.
relationships. You feel like the person's a little bit more invested in your life, and I think that there's a lot of value in sanity, is at least for me, because especially being freelance, I'm like by myself all the time, and so I don't have like an office that I go into per se, or like coworkers, and so that kind of like gives you that feeling of having that, and having that structure a little bit, um, which I find that I actually really like having. Where I didn't think that I did so much. I like having the flexibility of kind of getting to do things when I want to, which I think part of it, I was homeschooled growing up a lot, and so I would be able to like, I'm going to knock out on my schoolwork in like 2 or 3 hours, then I just go play outside. Or like maybe I wanted to play in the morning when it was nicer outside, then I'd like do my schoolwork in the afternoon. Like I could do that. And so I think that kind of translates to how I see things in general. And my dad was self-employed, or is. And so for freelance stuff, it's just like it just makes sense with the way that I always have kind of seen the world and operated from a young age. But I also always had like siblings around and people like my mom. And so you have these like relationships all the time.
Excuse me.
And so now whenever I like you, if you're by yourself, especially if you live by yourself and you're doing freelance stuff, and I mean, you can become very isolated very quickly, very easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, I think there's a time and place for that, you know? Um, but yeah, I think it's a balance, you know, and for sure, like entering into the lifestyle long time ago into like how it is now, for me, it's a lot different than what I thought it would be. And one of the things I realized was it's different for everyone, because you know, you have a different schedule for all the things you do, and you have, you know, you're at a different point in your life, you may have relationships, so it's like, I think the key is to, and that's again the best part about, like, you know, co-working spaces and creative communities, is you can see, like, not necessarily like things like, oh, I need to like model this, you know, verbatim or whatever, but it's like, okay, that kind of break it down and like just see how people do it to find your own, you know, groove and way, you know, and niche and all that kind of stuff, you
Hmm.
know. And I think that's half the battle, you know, because I know some badass, really talented like people, photographers out there and stuff, that, like, you know, they still struggle, but it's like, you know, you can't just be like a purist, you know, you have to get out of your comfort zone. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So
So, back to what your other stuff you were talking about with you and Bo.
oh, you
You
want
guys
to
had the
continue
studio.
the story?
Yeah, I think it's an
uh
interesting, because I mean ultimately you guys went from having a big team and all this stuff down to being like just the two of you for a while,
mhm.
and then there was other people that came and left and here and there that have like worked, and interns, and like y'all have some remote people you work with, from like attorneys to people that do like contracts and different kind of stuff like that for you. And so I feel like you guys are kind of in this in between, like you're a company, you're a business, but at the same time you're kind of freelance partners, kind of,
Well,
sort of. And so at least in the way that you function a lot. And so I think there's a lot of that stuff in the story of where you guys came from to where you are now that would kind of help, um, just have some insight into like why, because we've talked before about like scaling up and doing other stuff, and those kind of your response was almost like, well, I mean, we had that stuff before, but we really kind of like things the way they are now. And so I'm going like, well, why? What were the trade-offs?
so
What
who
like pushed you to that
so
point?
who's the audience though for like this conversation, like people who are
A lot of this is like mostly like free, like ideally people that are newer to freelancing
okay,
within the first few
cool.
years of freelancing, or are still kind of like getting their grounding, or just want perspective and kind of in that
Yeah, sure.
vein.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, well, the first part, it's like we're, you know, we have a company, but we're contractors, so we don't have employees, right? So that's a big, like, we're no different than home builders. I compare ourselves to home builders a lot, you know, and really the process of like what we do, creating videos to building a house, um, because we're all just like a house builder. They're independent contractors hiring other independent contractors, right? You're building one thing. You've got one final product you're producing. For us, a video. For them, a house. Um, you've got a budget, whatever it may be, and you've got a timeline and deadline, right? Building a house, making a video. You also have a process and order of operations that has to be done in the proper sequence and the proper order, timed out properly, scheduled properly, coordinated properly, communicated properly, right?
Yep.
Because the roofers have to come in and the painters have to come in after the framers and the foundation and the landscaper. You don't put in the landscape first, right? And so it's very similar. And that's a good way to when you're working with clients and when you're freelancing, you're going to start to realize that if you haven't, watched like Gary V videos and other videos about starting up or whatever, you're going to realize that when you go into business for yourself, i.e. freelance, like half of what you're doing now is like the thing that it is, like you're like filmmaking or editing or like composing, writing, whatever. And the other half, or maybe 40 to 50% is going to be like your marketing, you going out to creative mornings in Denton and creative mornings in Dallas and like watching content like this and like learning and like all the other things, and like invoicing people and like running your business, right? That's paramount. If and if ultimately, yeah, you want to hire people to do that, which is what we've done, but like we didn't have the money to do it at first. And like, so there's things there's still things we don't have the money to do, or we don't want it, we'd rather invest, so we have to do DIY, and that's just part of it. And like, it's a transition, to get to those things. And again, there's no one model. I can tell you our story and how we did it just for perspective, but don't do what we did. Maybe yes, maybe no, but it's just to illustrate, like, you've got to know you and your flow and your goals and what you want to do before you set out to and all these things in the books and and ingest and learn as much as you possibly can, because it's going to educate you to make the best possible decisions for you. But it's like, you got to know yourself and what your goals are in your direction and what you want to do. And that's sometimes harder to figure out than the other stuff, And really, like, I feel like I'm still figuring that out. You're always figuring that out, involving who you are, right?
But I think it changes and grows as you grow.
Right. And so yeah, we're contractors. We don't have any employees, officially, but so we contract people out, but we don't just hire anyone. We have a core group of people, from on-set camera operators to sound people to, composers and editors and so on and so forth, that we've been working with for some of them for 10 years, and like, but they're, so they're our go-to, person for this or that job. So our crew is the same, but it's still on a contract basis. They're not coming in and clocking in 9 to 5 at my company or vice versa, right? And so, and we do turnkey projects, which means like people commission us to do like, hey, we need a video A to Z, from development, scripting, ideas, to everything that it takes to execute it, revisions, everything. We need a final, like a house with the landscaping, with the sprinklers, with the lighting pack,
ready to go.
Ready to go. And then, and sometimes, other people, will get contracted to more seldom to come in, like if they need a DP or director or creative team, for a day or for a project or for whatever, so we'll be hired guns in that capacity and work with like brands and agencies, people from out of town. Like this week we've got a shoot with the National Hockey League coaches. They're having a conference here and we're covering, they're having a golf tournament. They need a same day edit, turn it around for dinner from the golf tournament. And then so it's like this whole thing, event stuff, but that's more for hire. Some of it's turnkey, so it's like everywhere in between, like get in where you fit in, like we noticed our strengths, we know our weaknesses. That's where we have to like contract out help, and we know our recipe to build a house, and now we've built enough houses where like, there's Think Branded Media custom homes, like why would you want to get this home builder versus that home builder versus hiring like a famous architect to build your home, right? Same thing with the video. And there's like different price points and timelines and like, and like we, are in a lane with with what we do on like from a budget standpoint and a quality standpoint and a scale, and like I feel like we found a good niche for us and what we do, but we're always trying to expand that even more so. But yeah, so that's why it's like we do kind of whatever from a contract basis and work with, yeah. And number one kind of value of Think Brand and Media is collaboration, because like video production, filmmaking is like probably one of the most collaborative of media there is out there. It's a team sport, just like building a house. And part of this is like knowing how to work with people and like knowing when to stay in your lane, or knowing how to stay in your lane, or what your lane even is in a given context, framework, or a team. And knowing that and being comfortable in that, and knowing, when to contribute and how to contribute best, you know what I mean? And not get in the way of yourself or get in the way of the project or like your people, and deal with, you know, and where this is even more difficult than home building is that this is a creative thing. So it's like, there's no one way to pour the concrete or whatever. It's like, this is so many interpretations and egos involved because we're all artists at varying capacities. And so that's, you got to keep focused on the goal, and sometimes that goal is not your goal, it's like a client's goal or something like that. So there's a lot of things. And I remember when we were going back to like the story, is like when we were like younger and had all this overhead, it's almost like we didn't even, it's like we won we had the trophy, and won the race, but we hadn't finished running the race. So it was a weird feeling. And I knew in my gut, because again, Beau and I, like, what we try to just keep it as real as possible, with ourselves and other people. And like, that's our barometer, like, as far as like our definition of that, and staying true to our purpose of what we're doing it, why we're doing it, and stuff like that. And, but ultimately we, and that business was making money, but had an enormous overhead. And so almost all the money was going to cover the overhead, which we could barely even cover. And so we really weren't making any money. And so it got to points where like Beau and I both had to like, were homeless and like lived at this place. It was pretty cool. We had showers and laundry. I mean, it was in kitchens and stuff like that. So you could live there, but it was crazy. We were that broke, but we had this like gold mine that we were sitting on, but just couldn't put it into effect. It was like, it came too soon. It's like, I don't really know what to do with this. It's like too overwhelming. I don't have enough, I don't even know who I am in the respect of like a creative, professional, and ultimately, that partnership and company dissolved because it was just like not sustainable, and everyone kind of wanted to go in their different direction. It ended cordially, and thankfully we knew like 6 months in advance that like, we're like, hey, in 6 months we're going to end the company. So that gave us time. It gave everyone time to, plot out their next move. And that's important, like, and even in our production process, in a home building process, what's paramount is pre-production and planning, right? But look up videos and why that's important, later, whatever. But so yeah, we had time on our side, and we really got to sit down and think of the brand and like the name and like this and that, and we had to unwire ourselves a lot. But ultimately, and we flipped that whole business model. We're like, and now we moved into a small office in a co-working space. Our overhead was like basically nothing compared to what it was. We had a lot of equipment in the last company, but we had to start over with all the equipment. So we were starting from scratch to a large degree. We brought over a few clients, but we were, totally starting out, new brand, new company, new everything. And we had no gear. So why would we want, we wanted the lowest overhead as possible, and we have a super low overhead. And it's not like, I'm sure like when I was someone starting out in their early 20s or mid 20s doing this, dude, they would love to show people that studio and like, or you're like, your new camera or whatever. But so I guess the takeaway, I guess, is like, when you're starting out, I know it's exciting and the new car smell, and you just can't wait to get your hands on like this or that because you saw it in a video or heard it in a podcast or whatever. But like, really think first of like, what are you trying to do? Why are you doing it? What can you visualize what that is? And then from there, really think about it a lot and start breaking down like, what do you need to do that? And typically it doesn't entail half the other shit that you think you want, and that's life. That's like just you're human, that's gonna happen. But the more you can kind of like dissect that and see what you need, and then also like what you know, you'll then know like what you need and what you want that you can't get immediately, and you're not good at procuring or finding. Like I'm not a computer person at all. You know, so it's like, yeah, well, I need to work with people that like know how to like troubleshoot like IT stuff. And like Bo is like a badass production designer, graphic designer. He knows programs that I don't know, you know. But then I handle a lot of the business type of stuff and invoicing and administrative stuff that it's not his strongest suit. And so that's when you learn, you know, your lane. And when you know that, and then can find people like that want to like get on the same highway and race down the 6-lane highway with you, you could really do stuff, you know. Um,
Because if you found your lane and you're able to stay in your lane and out of others, and other people are able to find theirs and stay out of yours, and y'all are just going together, like
you can get to
it's
the
gonna be
finish
great.
line
It's gonna get there a
faster.
lot faster,
You can
and
go 120.
and it's gonna be better. It should be better than if you did it by yourself, because I mean, dude, the deeper I get into stuff, the more I realize there's more detail and there's like more
Yeah.
and more layers to stuff.
Yep.
And
That's good.
it is, but the deeper you get into stuff, you also realize like, shit, I can't do all this on my own, and you have to have those other people.
Watch the credits. Like we do documentary stuff, and we're working on a passion project for a documentary project, and it's really just like us. It's like a team of like 3 or 4 maybe at best. But then like go on Netflix and watch a good, documentary. And I do that. I watch like equivalent type of documentaries of like what we're working on. And then you like watch the credits and it's like, 100 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, a lot,
There's a
and
lot
if,
of people, a lot of hands on it.
yeah. And even if like the house, like this building we're in right now, if they had the credits for who worked on what on this building and who did what, or your house that you're in, it's like it'd be a long list too, you know? And so like that's why like another thing is like, as we built our clientele to clients who are actually like know about the process, and we don't have to, it's like we're when we started out, we have to explain to like our clients and our customers of like, hey, here's why you need a video, but now it's like, here's why you need a good video. And now it's like, okay, you've called us because you need a good video, but like here, and it's just, we're dealing with people that are more savvy with like the process, their background maybe in the same as ours with production. They're at an agency, they're head of marketing or at a big brand or something like that. Like it's man, I totally forgot where I was going. What I was talking about before that, but
It's okay. It happens.
will you cut this part out?
I don't know.
Nah, fuck it.
Nah,
leave
we'll
in
leave
there.
it in. It's
Nah, leave it
okay.
in. But yeah, that's why Bo's. I'm very non-linear.
Yeah, you're talking about staying in our lanes.
But yeah,
Knowing your stuff.
yeah, and so oh yeah, and people like that, like when you're starting to pitch yourself and your portfolio and your work, and you're going after that level and a higher level, there's certain red flags that like if the budget's too low, or if you're like, oh, we can do everything, we do it all, it's like, well, okay, you may know how to do, you may not have a working rudimentary or fundamental knowledge of, mixing concrete and framing and roofing, or like, for us, like shooting, editing, scripting, color correction, scoring, audio, all these different things. Like I can do a lot of those things, right? But like not all of them, some more proficient than others, most of them less proficient than, what I do, and like you said, like if you want to make like a good work, and that's what like these bigger brands are looking for, good work. I mean, again, look at like what's out there. That's what you should be measuring yourself to in your work, and like how are they doing that? Like that's your whole process, like deconstructing. It's like, what lens did they use? What camera? Well, it's not what light. It's all, deconstructing this whole thing, and you're the process of it. It's like the 10,000 hours.
It's part of the machine. It kind of makes me think of like whenever you're talking about like what cameras, what lenses. It's like you think about that stuff as far as like, okay, what gear do they use, and what are the different pieces? But why most of the time we don't. I feel like we don't think about the pieces of the rest of the machine, of like the other people that are involved. Just like you wouldn't think of like just a camera. Like no, you have like this lens, you have this camera body, you have this follow focus, you got this screen, and so just like that, you got this makeup artist, you've got this set designer and whatnot.
And it's like, everyone that's like succeeds, with this is like a niche, has their niche, whether it's like this person's really good at like shooting food, or this person like does all this like sports stuff, or like, people we know, like Tyler Sharp, he's like outdoors safari hunting, stuff. And like we're like our thing is like more of like, corporate, but it's kind of edgier, docu style content. You know what I mean? And and it took us a while to develop that, and like we're constantly refining that, and like watching stuff and feeding ourselves like what inspiration through other media and people, relationships, and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really important. But like yeah, ultimately you have to work through and realize like even like just the maturity of like, hey, focus on like what your end game. And some people do that better than others. But yeah, for us it was like low overhead, um and start piecing together our gear again, building that up, and be fiscally responsible. And like, if you do credit cards, pay it off and just be a good business person, or find someone to work with to include that is a good business person. And like, again, as our company grew, we have an accountant, that we don't have an employee, like an in-house accounting department, right? But at our company, but we have an accountant we work with that it's on a contract basis, but she's been working with us since before we even opened our offices. And that was important for us. And it was kind of crazy because we were paying her. We didn't even have money to pay her. It's coming out of our pockets basically, but we knew it was important to have established really good, financial from the very beginning when you're starting out, like all your records, and make sure you're in line with taxes, and that you should be charging sales tax, or when you shouldn't charge sales tax, and getting all that stuff. And like you don't have to go to accounting school, but there's people that do that, and like yeah, they charge, and you're gonna have to start building that in, and like you'll be able to afford that stuff.
What
Over time.
so whenever you guys started bringing on different contractors for stuff, is there a certain like order of like, okay, this is what we need first over this, or like prioritizing
Yeah.
and figuring out, how did you figure out that order, and like what, as far as the selection process or any of that stuff that you could.
Well, for us, like we love doing as cool work and creative work as possible, but we can't do that unless we have the time to do that, and the lights on, and the resources to do that. So the number one thing for us is like number one thing is like you have to have a good sustainable business. So like do whatever you have to do wedding video, do whatever you have to do to make money, to build up your business and sustain yourself. Um, you know, uh, and part of that for us was like, okay, business costs, like filing an LLC, and hiring people to help us put that together, getting an accountant, opening up a bank account and stuff like that, and getting an accountant involved immediately. And we work with a CPA as well, who's actually one of our former business partners. Um, and she does our taxes every year. She handles that part of it. So our accountant kind of prepares that stuff for the CPA, but because our accountant doesn't do taxes, she just does like bookkeeping basically. So that's just happenstance a relationship, but like, that for us was paramount first, to like make sure we're because as you're moving forward, you don't want to get like a big job and then be like, okay, what do I do with, how do I handle this money? And like, where do I pay the tax? Like you want to have that figured out, because your client and your collaborators are expecting you to be going 120 miles an hour side by side with them down the 6-lane highway. Right. And if you're like going 80 because you're in the back seat, or like, oh, like I don't like know what to do, then that's unprofessional. You know what I mean? And like that it's just like you got to be prepared, right? So, we have a lawyer that we work with. We have a couple lawyers that we work with at different capacities. That doesn't mean we're like these badass, like, oh, got a legal team like in the next door. It's like, no, we have like those people again. They can work with you on contract basis. They charge by the hour, by for their time. And when you need them for stuff like a contract, like putting together your production agreement that you give to your clients when you start working with them, like, it's not every time, we have one, or he helps us create one. We pay him for his time to do that. And like, that's what we use, from here on out. But you need someone to make sure you're running your stuff legally. You know what I mean? And like, because you have when you start a company, you're responsible, like this isn't just like, if something happens, you're responsible,
It's not just like fun and games creating
yeah.
cool stuff
It's not
anymore.
like starting a club in like
Yeah.
school. Like this is like, it's not the video club, whatever. It's like a business, and there's like liabilities and implications. Like, and you can't, be like, oh, I didn't know about that I had to pay taxes, or I had to like, do this, and you can get into big trouble if you don't do it properly. Like you can lose everything, and so you have to know. Again, you don't have to go get an MBA and learn about business, but like, Google, for fuck's sake. Like there's so much, and it's like, dude, that's one thing that like there's never been more information and resources on how to do like anything, how to bake a key lime pie, or how to start a video production business, and like services, and like videos, and like podcasts and subscriptions, and like there's these guys like Studio Sherpas who like help you do this. It's like there's brands that do like this, like, and it's like, do that. You know what I mean? It's like in your pocket. You know what I mean?
There are ample ways of doing it.
And like a lot of people these days, like just they don't want to put in the time, and like there's a difference. Like people that apply to internships for our company, like there's some people that like, they email you like, hey, here's the application that I downloaded from your website and I filled it out and here it is, blah, blah, blah. And there's people who call and they're like, hey, do you all do internships? And it's like, so don't be the latter, and it's like, do the work, or do something else, you know what I mean? But don't bellyache about really anything, and that's the only bellyaching that I'm going to do on your podcast. But like the next thing, insurance, like if you have gear or a computer, or if you're renting gear, or if you're even like, if you're doing anything like off of your property on someone else's property on a set, and your company, like, you need insurance, and it's not, it's affordable. And if you can't afford it, then start, figure out how to afford it, whether it's charging more, or like, so figure out how to afford it, because you need it, you know what I mean? And like we pay, and I'll plug Ascend Insurance Brokerage. They're local here in Dallas, but they work with people all over the country. And they do specifically production insurance, and they insure festivals. Like they do like big stuff. Like,
so is it like per project
you can do that
stuff, or is it
you
blanket?
you can do per project, but you're going to pay more. I pay for an annual policy that I pay every month. I pay it off every month. And it's I have what's called a DICE policy, DICE, documentary industrial.
Commercial?
No, I thought it was, but I don't think. Yeah, maybe it's commercial and education.
Okay.
So it covers that. It doesn't cover like a feature film, but it's like it's a big policy. It's like 2 instances of $1 million, which is like ample, and that's really the biggest thing I'm afraid of, is like losing footage and having to go to like fly somewhere to have to reshoot something, and like that could like tank us. We're in a large company.
Whereas like having that insurance policy would allow
Yeah,
you to
they
fund
would pay to like do it. I mean, once I get out of like the situation, but like at least we could be like, hey, the best we can do is reshoot this, and like we'll pay for that, right? And so like, otherwise you can get sued, and whatever. So like, again, you got to be prepared, and like, because shit happens, and it's going to happen. We've had stuff stolen off set, and like we've had things break, and like and when it happens, I don't get upset about it, because it's like that's part of it. Like the dude on the construction site accidentally breaks a pane of glass, or like it's part of business. And like if you crash your drone, or like you lose footage or whatever, like lose a project and you lose like 12 hours of work, and it's like that's part of it. That's like when the sprinter is training and he falls and like breaks his arm, and like it's like anyone successful has gone through that stuff. And like, so it's almost like I work through pitfalls like that by being like, hey man, that means I'm on the course, which is like, hey, I'm at least, doing it. So you write it off, and people have stolen ideas, and like, and I hate when people bellyache about people biting them and like stealing the ideas. And it's like, dude, like that's
like, cool, you had a really great idea.
Yeah, good for you. Stay on track, and you're ahead of the pack. But it's like that's always has happened. Will continue to happen. It's part of it's human nature. Like, just do it.
So with you mentioned the. You need to grab your drink.
Yeah,
grab it. Do it. Lean over there. Get it.
I
with
mentioned, yeah.
you mentioned your like production agreement, and you said, from there, and then we're good beyond that. What do y'all do as far as contracts or production agreements?
Well, sometimes if it's a big enough client, we don't do anything. They're like, here's our agreement and our NDA, and like here's the terms. And if it's like, sometimes you do whatever you're told, right?
But those typically pay really well too, don't they?
Yes, I mean,
And
again,
so it
it's
makes
like
it worth.
totally, yeah. But so yeah, sometimes that's the case. So sometimes don't do anything. Maybe if it's something like crazy, like out of the ordinary for us, we'll show our attorney, and be like, hey, does this look okay? Whatever. Again, that equivalent of that comes down to like you're. It's not expensive to involve an attorney with that. They're just reading something. And other times, so we have like a standard production agreement that's always evolving and stuff like that, because it's always case by case of how people are paying, what they're paying, what they're like, everything, the process,
I mean, each project is like slightly different too, right? So I
every
imagine
home is
that comes
different.
into like consideration too.
Yeah, even if, and we don't build the same house, right? Like every Big Mac should be the same, but like, our houses are not track homes, neither should yours, I mean, if you want to go to that route, that's cool, and like work on a volume basis, but really like what we do, and I think what I've seen successful creative freelancers do is like find your style, find your voice, find your lens, and and like that's what people they're hiring you, for you, and like no one could do you but you, right? Um, and so like double down on that. That's your best bet, and figure that out, and like look how people figured their shit out, but don't do other people's shit, right? But yeah, so typically like if someone reaches out to us for a project, it's like the same thing. They reach out to us, and they typically do so by filling out a form on our website, which we have set up, again, to like funnel this stuff in, because I've studied a lot about like SEO and marketing. I'm interested in it. And even if I wasn't, it's very relevant to like putting yourself out there and like marketing yourself. And again, there's so many ways that you can do that, like very cost effectively, cheap, even if you're like even if you're like just starting out. We just took on an intern that's like, he's 21, he's still in college, but he's already got a company, he's got a portfolio, had clients, and I'll even plug him, Rigid Motion Films, or Rigid Motion Pictures, Rigid Motion. And it's like, dude, that's, you know, and he's already, like, as an intern, which is an unpaid internship, he's like already making money with us because he's providing value. And like, we're like, we'd hire someone to do what he's doing for us, so we'll pay him. But yeah, he's like really on his grind, and like he's figuring it out, and it's like, as long as there's people like that, we're people aren't going to entertain like anything like that. Like if someone's setting the bar like there, that's where it is. So you have to like compete with that, and like and make it happen. Other costs. So like insurance and like our product. So yeah, for that policy, it's like around $5,000 a year.
Okay.
So I think that's like $420, $30 of 450 or something a month. Okay. Yeah, that's like car payment or whatever. But like, again, it's just like, I look at it, I'm like, yeah,
Part of your cost of doing business.
yeah, dude, it's like, and it's not that bad, and I'm glad I have it. And that's through, yeah, Ascend Insurance. And like, they're, awesome. We've been with them forever. What other hard costs?
We're
Yeah,
talking
like,
about production agreements and contracts.
okay. Yeah. Sorry. So,
It's okay. We got off in a good tangent.
oh yeah. So they'll fill out our website form. They'll so now we have their information. We'll save that for like email campaigns and stuff through our CRM, which is, we use ProsperWorks because we do everything on the Google Drive, keep everything organized from finances to projects and everything on our Google Drive. And like spreadsheets and budgets and stuff like that, and like shared documents with when you're in collaboration with clients and stuff like that. That's a really good resource, very cost effective too. But I'll typically just reach out if I get a phone number, and or set up a call with the person, even though we ask them like, what's your message, what's your audience, and go to our website, thinkbrandedmedia.com or thinkbranded.media, go to our contact page and like see the form of like what we ask, and we're going to add a few more, and it's like, what's your budget range? We ask that. It's optional, but it's about to be mandatory. And I know some people are against that and some people are for that. And it's like, it's like, do you?
That's
you know?
fine, but it also helps to know that. So whenever you talk to them,
Yes.
knowing like,
For me, the reason why I want to know that is because more people are hitting us up right now for where we're at with our SEO and everything for like projects like under $5,000, which like that's not we're in our price range, and we don't typically do projects in that price range, and so like it's good to know because I don't want to work through a 2-hour conversation or meeting with someone and know that their budget's like
yeah,
$2,500.
which, and then I think just to kind of talk about that a little bit, uh, having that standard set in place, I think is probably, it's not so much like, oh, we don't do projects like that. It's that like fiscally as a business and to keep things going, you can't sustain the business taking projects like
Yeah, that's just
underneath
our
that.
business model.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
just like in order to be able to keep the business going, like with everything, like that's where things have to be
Yeah,
at
and
in order to keep going.
yeah, and I mean, there's like people like other companies that are peers, and we know that they don't go under $50,000 or they don't go under $100,000, and like again, that's like the difference between like a Kia, a BMW, or a Ferrari, and they're all cars, and like it's like there's nothing wrong with driving a Kia, nothing at all, and there's nothing wrong with having a T2i with a lens adapter and like going and renting a good lens to go shoot something. Rent a good lens for $50 or $60 for a couple of days, and you can do. I know some really good creatives that get work that are shooting on like prosumer cameras and good glass and good lighting. They know what they're doing and they're going with it. You know what I mean? Just go with what you have. But anyway, so the agreement is we'll reach out, we ask them what their budget is, budget range, who their audience is, what the message or messages are, what their timeline is. Give me your website, let me see your social channels and see what you're doing out there. Like show me your presence out there, your brand out there online in the digital media capacity, so we can just get and that's going to give you a big feeling. If they don't have anything, then they're going to be like, okay, like am I having to explain why they need a video? Or if it's like an agency, or if it's like a company that has like badass videos already on their website, or like badass website, and like all they need is like, oh man, all they need is video. You'll know, and then that kind of sets up the the tone and the conversation and like the vibe of like, and because your job at that point, like what I do is I contact them on the phone and listen. Like, what do you need? Like, what are you trying to do? And ask them the same questions over again, and really usually they'll tell you, and you'll know a lot. Like, do they know? And sometimes these people are like, the shoot that we have this week, I have like everything mapped out like so well, which makes my job easier. I can even work on, doing it more efficiently and like, putting more on screen when we have all of our, ducks in a row versus a client that's like not involved, not engaged. And that's where we charge more for clients like that aren't as involved versus clients that are involved, because it comes down to one takes us longer to build that house.
To do more of the work.
Yeah, it's just time.
Yeah.
And also figure out what you need, like what your overhead is, even if you live at home and whatever, figure out what it costs to do where your goals are, whether it's to move out or whatever, figure out, like, so write it down, and no one's going to do that for you, and just sit down and do it. Like, how much money do you need to make? Because I've heard people that are like, as far as like what people charge and what to charge and the debate over that, like tap into the debate over that. So, like, again, get some information, but like ultimately, you got to find your own value. That's one of the things that like you have to figure out and be confident in, and find your value. And don't be afraid if people think you're too expensive or too cheap. And like, you have to adjust accordingly. And that's another, always adjust. We're going everywhere in this podcast, man. Like,
it's okay. We're all over the place, but it's all, we'll get to tying it back.
The agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you talk to them on the phone, you get on the phone, talk to them.
And then I tell them, and that's a creative conversation. Give them ideas. Who cares? Most of them are gonna take them and run, or like hire someone else. Whatever. It's a good practice to get on the phone and like get back and forth with people. You want to be knocking doors, and like talking to as many people as possible, especially when you're starting out in this, And that's how you're gonna find your voice and like your niche, and like who you want to work with also, and like what you like hearing, what you don't like hearing. Like you just gotta do it. Call a ton of people, or talk to a ton of people. So typically I'll get them excited, kind of tell us more about us and like what we think, and it's a creative conversation. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna email you after this and like recap with a cost estimate. And it's not just an estimate on cost, but also like a turnaround time. And like, here's an estimate of like what we can do, the scope, the timing, and the cost. You know, and I have like a template email that I already have, and I basically copy and paste that to them. And it's always good when you talk to someone on the phone. It's a good practice. Someone told me, um, of like when you have a meeting with someone, email them the same day. It takes you like 5 to 10 minutes, and mention their name, where you met, what you talked about. So like later today, if this was our first meeting, I'd be like, email you and I'd say, hey Casey, it was so good meeting with you in your studio today, talking about the creative freelance lifestyle. Because then like in a week or two, if you open it, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that guy. Boom.
Yeah, it's
Right?
immediate. You remember who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good little pro tip or whatever, and like, and then they have that email. It's in context. They could easily identify you and whatever. And like, just, and that says a lot too when someone communicates to you that way, that like, okay, this person's easy. Like when interns and like entry level people contact us to do work, it's like, people that have it figured out and make it easy for you, like that's who a lot of times you're going to want to gravitate towards, for us. Cause it's like, okay, this guy gets it. He knows we don't have to start explaining how we need help. It's
You're
just,
finding them like
yeah.
further along in that buying cycle.
Yeah.
Which is
And so
ideal.
again, you're gonna fill that out. And so then I send them the email, and at the top I'm like, okay, based on our conversation and the information that we know at this point of your project, our estimated cost is X, and here and here's our this is gonna take about a month or 6 weeks to start and finish this project. And then it's like and then from here, what we're gonna do is like have another conversation to like narrow down the details and like get on the same page about the budget and everything. If the budget's like lower, we're gonna have all the necessary conversations to get where we need to regarding budget, timeline, and creative. And once we're in accord on that stuff, we're gonna execute this production agreement. You're gonna sign it. You're gonna give us 50% up front. And then we're gonna get going, and then in the email it says, okay, here's pre-production starts, and here's what pre-production is gonna entail, like what we're gonna do, how long it's gonna take, and so forth. Then I'm like, next paragraph, production. Then we're gonna go into production in bold, production, where that's gonna take this long. Typically, it takes this long, or whatever you discuss with them, or you're really recapping what you've already told them over the phone, like about like kind of the walking them through the process of like building this house. Right.
Right. And the way the way that y'all do it specifically. 'Cause
Right.
everybody does it a little
Sure.
bit differently.
But yeah, but it's like a recap in writing, because a lot of these people have to show their team and the people in their highway and their superiors. And you want to make it easy for them to be like, dude, all I have to do is forward this email, this concise email with all the info to my boss so we can approve it. And I can approve it and we can get it moving, right? Because that's the end game. You got to keep it moving, because people will sit there for months and not get back with you and blah, blah, blah. And following up is another thing. Always schedule to follow up with people and make them say no to you. Make them be like, no, we're not ready. And just hound them. Be like, dude, if you're not, don't ghost on me, hold people that contact you and ask you to put together bids and your time and estimates. And so that's your time, and it takes time. Right. And hold them accountable. If you don't hear back from them, don't be afraid after a week or two to be like, hey, I'm just following up about my last email and our conversation and this bid and estimate and all the stuff I put together for you with these links in my portfolio that took me time to put together. This, if they're professional, they'll know. And usually, and oftentimes, even when people are not ready or they want to pass, they go with someone else, they'll give me the professional courtesy to be like, hey, thanks. Sorry, I didn't email you back sooner. We're going, and put people to the fire, man.
Yeah.
Because that's how you like command respect and stuff. And like, that's just normal. Even if you're starting out, you have your time, everyone's time, that's the most valuable commodity is people's time. And so, yeah, then the next conversation, which is like, the awkward conversation of like the budget and stuff like that. And a lot of these people, like, again, it's not their money, and like their job is to just like make this happen. So like even big numbers, like don't be afraid to talk about big numbers, or like, things that are non-negotiable for you. If they ask you to do too much, and like don't say yes to things you can't do. Say, hey, say no, and then sort it out. And like typically if you're dealing with a professional, they're gonna like they're on your team at that point, and they're gonna find a way to sort it out. If they don't, that's a red flag. You should, like you might not want to deal with that, or maybe you do and get the learning experience out of it. But like, no, that's not typical in a professional like situation. Same thing with payment. And like, that's what the beauty of our accountant is, like, if they're not paying, like, she'll contact them.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about
And
that.
that's good to separate yourself, especially in like that dynamic. And also partner. That's what I love about a partnership is like, you can have the good cop, bad cop. So it's like when you're dealing with a client, this person's always like, hey, everything's cool. Like the hype person, keep everything positive and pumped. But like, you know, the other person might be like holding everyone accountable to like, hey, we got to get this finished, guys, and like kind of cracking the whip. And like, that's a great part of a team dynamic, and use your team and use your people to their strengths in those capacities to get things done, and it's different every time, right? And so, yeah, then we'll get going. That's our contract. And our contract, it lays out, the terms, and like there's some legalese in there, legalities and like jargon and stuff that you have to have in there to talk to your attorney that can do contracts. Like I can recommend one. But any business attorney or like entertainment attorney maybe can figure that out and like help you get something like that. But you, aside from those things, like you could put whatever you want in there. It's not like there's no one way to do it. Put whatever you want, like whatever you're expecting, and you could, and I just start writing it like how I would talk. I'm like, yeah, we're going to have this footage to you by this date or whatever the terms are. Just write it out. And then when you're done, you have your lawyer look over it, make sure everything's proper and like covered, like the way it ought to be. And a lot of times we'll submit our agreement to a company, and like they have maybe in-house attorneys that look at it, and they redline it and they're like, no, and they go back and forth a couple of times on an agreement, and like you just talk about it, and like, yeah, it's sort of awkward, but it's not, it's business.
It's business, and you have
Yeah.
to do
So
it.
if it's awkward or you don't know how to handle it, then like figure it out how to handle it, because that's what is just how it is, I guess,
Yeah.
So
Do you guys, with your stuff and you shoot, what do you do as far as like copyright assignment and like who owns the footage and all that stuff?
good question. So like, we have never like until recently charged, like I've never dealt with like licensing our footage per se, like to a client for a project. And we always knew, like in photography, we always look at like in photography, I hire you to take a photo, I pay you to take the photo, but then I pay you to license the photo you just took from me, because if you produced it, it's your property, so you have to like license it to me, the ownership of like the actual photo itself. And so photographers always had that game. And Austin Mann said, you know, he once told us that, the difference between photographers that, just get by and photographers that do well is licensing. And so like look up that, whether you're, like look Google licensing and like just read about it. That's a huge thing, but like you should know about that. But in the video game, that wasn't as, to us, it wasn't as, because we were like a service and like, whatever, but we would always charge like a service fee on top of everything, which is like to cover our, like a percentage of like the budget, which covered like our overhead and stuff like that. So, it was just like we always charge a percentage, and in essence, we've found that in essence, you can call that a service fee. You can call that like a margin. You can call that a licensing fee, but either way, it's like we charge a percentage when you hire us, and like, we can call it whatever you want to call it, licensing fee, service fee, whatever, but like, it's there, and it's a percentage, and that's scalable, whether it's, if it's a nonprofit, sometimes we don't charge one at all or very, very low, versus like, a big agency or like, just something like that's going to be out there on a larger scale, like it's going to be higher,
So like, for example, basically, so you would charge whenever you're billing out, like you would bill for production, which covers your costs of hiring people to shoot, or whether it's you're shooting it or whatever, but then on top of that, percentage for usage, right? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, and I mean, if you want to just do it, just call it usage. But again, on the actual line item, it's just a percentage, and when we call it a licensing or usage fee, like that percentage really, it goes to cover our overhead and our business, and like that's where our profit margins lie and stuff like that. So, but yeah, you should do that, but don't be the guy that like has like a weak reel and you're just starting out and like, and be like, well, here's my usage fee. It's like, some people aren't gonna like, they're gonna be like, what? If you're at a mom and probably like, well, there's another guy who doesn't do that or whatever. So like, it's a fine line. It's like a gray area. And like, again, like you'll figure it out, But I have seen a lot of people like at entry level starting out that like, a little bit too ambitious and like almost cocky, like with what they want to charge and like whatever. But do that too. If that's what you want to do and you think you can charge a lot of money, try it out. Maybe it works.
So then do you have like in your contract agreements anything that like talks about that at all as far as
Oh,
like copyright, or it's like
yeah,
says
yeah.
like you have like what is
Yeah, well, that also depends, but like on our standard agreement is that once the balance for a project, a video project, is paid, right, and we're paid in full on that project, then the client owns the footage, the rights of the footage. So if they want, they can re-edit it. And again, some people might be calling me crazy, but like if you want to go re-edit it, I'm not going to argue if like you want to take the footage we shot, and like hire someone else to recut it or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. It's like we got paid for our time. That's what we're charging for it. Go for it. But what we do have a little clause in there that says any non-branded B-roll that we shoot, we keep the rights to. And like they can use it for their video, but like we own the rights to that. Um, and that way, like let's say if we're shooting, in a mechanics shop or like a factory or something, and we have like like an assembly or a cool shot of something, you know, that's like doesn't have their brand on there. You can't tell there's no one in it, whatever. It's just like a whatever, a location or whatever. We keep that just in case maybe we wanted to like use it for another project, which we don't even do. We
but
shoot.
you at least have the option, or licensing if you ever like were to start doing some sort of like stock stuff like
Yeah,
film supply or
exactly, and that's more the
stuff like
thing.
that.
And again, we don't. Again, we're just thinking ahead. We don't use that, and we I don't think we've ever used. Maybe we've like used like aerials or something, and have repeated it. Maybe in like smaller projects or something, but like typically again it's just you want to in your initial like contract and agreement, you want to have as much in your favor as possible, of things you need, and don't put things in there that you don't need just because someone else is doing it. Like think about what you need and what you can leverage and what you can negotiate, because that's part of it also, because there's going to be people that are trying, sometimes clients and people are trying to get, the best. I mean, who isn't trying to get the best bang for their buck and the best quality and stuff, So you got to be prepared to like negotiate and not be scared to do business, and not get your feelings hurt when someone steals an idea or like says, they think you're too expensive or like whatever. It's just like, it is what it is, man. Just keep going.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to need to wrap it up for this one. I'll have to have you come on again sometime because I feel like there's a lot more that we could
Oh
talk
yeah,
about.
I'll tell you the rest of the story, but no.
What um just wrapping up today's, what if like you're going to give advice to a freelancer, somebody new, and like what's the like quick like takeaway?
Oh man, there's no quick takeaways with me, but I'll repeat something. I heard the CFO of the Texas Rangers gave like a speech to a young group of graduates, and um, she said her guiding principles are be ethical, be flexible, and be a joy to be around and work with. So that's just some recent feed that I'll just like channel on to everyone because I think it's good. Um, and entry level, just if you're really trying to get into it, and just use your resources you have. Um, you know, well, absorb as much content and information and stories and perspective as you possibly can. And again, be ethical, be flexible, and be a joy to be around. And yeah, just keep going, man. I think it's like, have a vision and a dream and ambition, you know, think big, but also like have the grit and humble and like do the, put the work in 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on,
Yeah.
Daniel.
Sorry, I'm
Appreciate it.
long winded and I'm all over the place.
I love
but
it. I'll have you come back on sometime. We'll talk some more. We can talk about that stuff for a long time.
Yeah, we really can. Thanks, man.
Yeah, we'll get links from you. We'll put links to some of the stuff Daniel talked about in the show notes at vacasey.com/freelance Friday. Thanks for watching or listening, whichever. Freelance Friday is a Vacasey production. Vacasey is a full-service video production company based in Dallas, Texas. Vacasey, big video production value, freelance agility and scale.